Evening, everyone. I would like to welcome each and every one of you for this wonderful evening. My name is Dipanshu Agarwal. I'm a second year MPP student, which is Masters in Public Policy at Harvard Kennedy School. And I'm really honored to be today's moderator on a discussion on the role of religion and spirituality in today's society. It gives me great pleasure and privilege to introduce His Grace Suvyakta Narasimha Dasa ji, a distinguished senior Gaudiya Vaishnav monk who will be speaking today on the role of religion and spirituality in society. His Grace Narasimha Das ji is currently serving as the president of the Hare Krishna Movement Temple in Chennai. He completed his undergraduate degree in mechanical engineering and later joined the ISKCON Bangalore Monastery in 1999. Since then, he has been actively engaged in lecturing on religious and societal issues, delivering talks at prestigious universities and institutions across India as well as North America, such as MIT, Rutgers, IITs, and IIMs, which is the Indian Institutes of Technology and Management. He is widely recognized for his talks on the Mahabharata, the great Indian epic. As a practitioner of Bhakti Yoga, His Grace Narasimha Das ji has also conducted various spiritual workshops worldwide. His extensive knowledge of religious and spiritual traditions and culture, coupled with his insights into contemporary societal issues, make him an ideal candidate to address this topic on the role of religion and spirituality in today's modern society. We are honored to have His Grace Narasimha Das ji with us, sharing his wisdom and expertise. Please join me in welcoming him to Harvard Kennedy School.
All my dear friends, it's my pleasure to be in your presence today and to be able to share a little bit of whatever I have learned.
So, the structure for today's discussion, it's divided into two parts. First, we start with a moderated Q&A based on some important questions that we have received in the form of registration responses and other such topics, followed by the second half, which is the last 30 minutes, wherein we take questions from you all, who are today's audience, on how religion and society, religion and spiritualism play a role in today's society, and as well as different professions and practices that we engage ourselves in going forward. It's always great to see spirituality being discussed in a public policy school. On the top of it, we don't usually see a link between the two, but as we'll witness in today's conversation, there is a direct link between the two. And whatever benefit we can draw from this rich expertise and wisdom of spirituality into our own lives as we become public policy practitioners going ahead, we'll do that. So I begin with some questions that we have in our mind. And the first question is on the very words that form part of today's topic, which is how do you define spirituality and religion?
Well, when we speak of religion and spirituality, normally what happens is nowadays we can find different kinds of people having different opinions. They say it's fashionable sometimes to say that I don't follow any religion, but I'm a spiritual person. So actually, if you try to analyze a little bit deeper, what is religion? Religions normally comprise a set of rules and regulations, as a list of do's, what all you should do, and a list of don'ts, what all we should not do. So generally what happens is, when we look at these rules and regulations in isolation, they appear to be dogmatic, based on belief. If you believe in them, fine, you follow them, or else you don't. But if we look at the Vedic scriptures, we find a clear demarcation into three components when it comes to religion and spirituality. So there is the set of rules and regulations, what is expected of the people in the society, how they should conduct themselves, what is the way they should behave and relate with others. So there is a set of rules and regulations given there. So that forms what is known as the Karmakanda portion of the Vedas, where all these lot of rituals and all these kinds of rules and regulations are seen. Then there is the other portion, the second portion of the Vedas, which constitute the moral principles. What constitutes moral principles? Those are defined in terms of what are pious activities or what are known as punya karma. And there are activities which are called sinful activities, which is referred to in Sanskrit as papa karma. So we have morality and there is religiosity. And the third component, which we find in the Vedas, which is covered in the portions of the Vedas known as the Upanishads, the Vedanta Sutras, etc., is philosophy. So philosophy constitutes the knowledge or the theory behind the practice. Why we have to follow these rules and regulations. Unless we understand that philosophy, what happens is those rules and regulations appear dogmatic. We are unable to comprehend what is the logic behind these so many rules and regulations which are given. And especially with modern times, where society is fast changing in its perceptions, in its conceptions, etc. Some of these appear outdated, some of the practices appear outdated, or they seem irrelevant. But when we understand the philosophy behind them, then we start seeing them in a new light. So these three components actually put together constitute spirituality. Why? Because the essence of all these, whether it's morality, whether it's religiosity, or whether it is philosophy, the essence of it is the individual, the person. We all as persons are living entities who are different from matter. Like for instance, this table is there. It is dead matter. It has no consciousness. Whereas we have consciousness. We can think. We can perceive. We can theorize. We can analyze. We can try to understand why we exist in the first place. So for the philosophy, for the religiosity, and for the morality, the person who has all these capabilities, conscious capabilities, that person becomes the central point. And so therefore, it is all these three put together constitutes spirituality. When we say spirituality, the word spirit is involved in that, which implies that we are spirit souls. And so therefore, all these three things have to come together. So just like in college also we study theory. There is theory and then you have to put it into practice also. So similarly, the philosophy gives the theory, then the application of that in terms of the activity, what we should do, is given by the religious part of the scriptures, and the morality forms the foreground or the basis on which we carry out our dealings so that there is a standard by which we can relate with each other. Otherwise, life can become very chaotic, haphazard, and interpersonal relationships will become very difficult because I expect something from you, you expect something from me. I'm not tuned to your expectations, you are not tuned to my expectations. So what will happen? It will lead to clashes. And essentially, we all individuals, we want to have nice, pleasurable experiences. So that opportunity goes missing when we don't have a standard way of how the society has to behave in interpersonal relationships. So that, in essence, is the way I would sum up the connection between spirituality and religiosity.
So you have mentioned three important elements: morality, religiosity, and philosophy.
Yes.
How these three elements together form what we define ideally to be spiritualism or spirituality.
Yes.
And you mentioned the centrality of our individual consciousness in that process. But we are a universe, we are a society. So we are also a collection of individuals, all of us to come together and engage in so many activities.
Yes.
So from the society point of view, how does the intersection of religion and spirituality manifest in our day-to-day lives, shaping not just our own individual lives, but also the impact of this on society as a whole? So, if I link this to, let's say, a very public policy term, spirituality and religion, how does it play a role in what we identify to be systems thinking? When all of us come together as individuals, there is a system we give birth to. How does spirituality impact the society as a collective being.
Okay. So now what happens is, when we look at public policies and the various efforts we put in towards making the society a more harmonious place for all of us to live in, and to be able to peacefully conduct our activities, to be able to achieve our goals, our desires, etc. So now all the public policies are actually should essentially be directed towards enabling this for the society at large. Okay, so I'm talking from a very broad perspective. So now, if that has to happen, what we have to understand is that this world today comprises of fragmented uh, sections of the world in terms of different nations and different cultures, different communities. And what happens is that each nation, each community, each uh, society, whatever is there, they all have uh, different goals, different requirements, different aspirations which they want to achieve. Now, what happens is one nation or one community's aspirations, they tend to clash with another nations or another communities' aspirations, their desires, their priorities. And so, because of that, what we see is there is so much of conflict that arises in the society. Now, if we have to avoid these conflicts, and avoiding conflicts is essential, otherwise, what will happen is if we are constantly in a state of conflict, we cannot conduct our activities peacefully, right? Conflict once in a while is fine to be able to overcome certain, antiquated ways of thinking or old ways of doing things. But we cannot live constantly in conflict. So if the different, like we are seeing today in the world, even though we have a United Nations, all the nations are supposed to be united, but still there are nations which go to war, and there are expectations from one nation of another which is not being fulfilled, etc. So why this happens is, again, from speaking from a very broad perspective, because everybody is thinking in a very isolated fashion. They are all thinking in silos. So if we stand on the platform of spirituality, that we are all spirit souls, that is the common denominator, and we start working from that perspective, then what I believe is there can be a more harmonious way of the whole society in which the whole society can function. And if public policies are made on that platform, instead of on the platform of, for example, let us say, I'm an Indian, you're an American, he is a Pakistani, another is a Chinese, we make public policies on these platforms, it will definitely lead to conflict. You cannot avoid it. That is how the world, we can see how the world is functioning today. Now, on the other hand, if in our public policies, we bring in the concept or the perspective that whether irrespective of our nationality, irrespective of our religion, irrespective of our beliefs, irrespective of our gender, caste, race, etc., fundamentally, we are all spirit souls. We are all living entities. So that is the basis of spirituality. And if we start from there, definitely what I feel is we can see a big revolution in the way we make our public policies. And imagine if the whole world, all the nations, they think in terms of all the citizens of their respective nations as individuals, as living beings. Then what happens? We have a common platform on which at least we can start working towards a common goal. Otherwise, everyone will remain in their isolated positions, and then it will become difficult to reconcile the differences. In fact, our Acharya Srila Prabhupada gave a wonderful example to illustrate this, to explain this. He said, if we draw circles with different centers, they can intersect, isn't it? And so if we take different individuals keeping themselves as the center, as a nation or as a community or whatever we identify ourselves with, then what happens is I have my own center and I have a circle of my area of concern. You have your center and you have your area of concern and you draw a circle. There are definitely going to be places where there is going to be uh, intersections, which means there are areas of clashes. Now imagine there are innumerable such people. I'm talking of two individuals, but if all the people in sitting in this room today, if we were all to draw circles around ourselves, showing our areas of concern, we can see how many points of clashes will be there. And Srila Prabhupada said, if all of us make the center as spirituality, as the fact that we are all living entities, we are all spirit souls, then you keep drawing circles. No matter how many circles you draw, they will never clash. They will never intersect. So you have a common central point. So that common central point, unless and until we bring into our thinking, into our perspectives, whether it is public policy making or whatever we at large levels like the United Nations or wherever we try to work with, unless we have that common central point, the problem of conflicts that we have seen cannot be resolved. That is how I would look at it.
In our previous question and answer, you had mentioned that how spirituality is something bigger than religiosity, because religiosity is just one of the three elements that together define spirituality. So how do you see the relationship between the single element called religion and this larger concept called spirituality in society? What is the current state of the relationship between the two? And what would be your ideal relationship between the two concepts? So where do we stand at this intersection between spirituality and religion right now? But what is the ideal state for the relationship between these two variables to be? And what steps can we take to ensure that these two concepts come together and we make them come together to promote larger societal good? So what is the ideal relationship between these two elements?
Okay. So I mentioned briefly when we were discussing that point about how we have theory and we have practice. Like for instance, when I was doing my engineering in college, we used to have time for a lab session where whatever we would learn in physics or chemistry, we would go to the lab and we would try those things. There are two chemicals we combine, and this is the kind of reaction expected. And that's what we study in the theory. And then we go to the lab, and when we mix those two chemicals together, we actually see what's happening. So there is a practical aspect and there is a theoretical aspect. Now, when it comes to philosophy, we have the theoretical aspect of who we are, what is the larger purpose of life, how to progress towards that larger purpose of life, etc. And so the philosophy gives us a certain direction and a certain motivation to work in that direction. Now, you have to convert that theoretical knowledge of the philosophy into practical application, which is given by religion. Now, what happens is in today's world, we have forgotten the philosophy aspect, and we attach ourselves to the religion which we identify ourselves with. Maybe on account of our being born into a certain family, belonging to a certain religion, or we may develop our faith in certain religion, and we follow that. And that is how we term religions as faith-based activities. So it has current day world understanding is religion means it is simply blindly you have to apply your faith somewhere and follow that. You like to follow a certain religion, you follow that. Somebody else likes to follow that religion, you follow that. Somebody else does not believe in any religion, that is also okay. So, that's the current understanding. But if we look at the ancient, the Vedic civilization, the understanding used to be that religion is not simply based on faith. There used to be a lot of background knowledge from the philosophy which gives practical application in terms of religion. So now what happens is, unless we bring back that philosophy into the into the thinking, into the mindscape of the people, the real benefits of following that religious practices will not accrue to us. Normally, what happens is, suppose, for example, we have let us say, somebody who is a transportation engineer, and he designs a highway. Okay, and in the highway, according to the turns and according to the different aspects of the traffic engineering, he may decide that the road, that the maximum speed on that road should not cross 55 miles per hour or 70 miles per hour. Now, a person who goes in a vehicle on that road, he may not be aware of what is the thinking of that person who has designed that road. Why is he saying 70 miles per hour is the speed limit? So what happens is, because the person doesn't have that understanding, there is a tendency, oh, I'm running late, let me push it a little bit and make it 80 miles per hour. You see, you know, because you don't have the knowledge, your motivation to follow that rule, that regulation of following a certain speed limit, that motivation doesn't exist. Whereas the transport engineer who has designed, he knows further ahead, a few kilometers ahead, there is a curve which is coming. And there, if I exceed the speed limit, the risk of my car toppling is very high. It may go from 20% to 80%. So why would I take that risk? Let me keep within that limit. So, and just give a crude example. So in a similar way, the rules and regulations which are given in religion are meant to assist us, aid us in our progress, in our spiritual quest. That is what they are actually meant for. Now, when people follow the religion, they thinking that it's simply a faith and there is no philosophy behind it. What happens is the motivation to really follow those rules and regulations also becomes lax. And with time, what happens is people start thinking, why should I follow these rules and regulations? And these are actually impeding my aspirations to achieve certain goals in life. So why should I follow? So unless that philosophical backing is there, the motivation to follow the religion and to gain the full benefit out of it, we will only lose that. So that's how I would look at it.
So devoid of philosophy, when we try to follow religion without understanding the whys behind it, it can also lead to certain kinds of problems.
Yes.
Or it can potentially be a problematic thing in our day-to-day lifestyles.
True.
And there is a possibility that if we don't follow it in its most well-intentioned way or sense, things might also become harmful for us personally or for the society at large.
True.
So there's a growing concern, and we deal with these concerns and discussions in our classrooms, in our day-to-day lives over here at Kennedy School, that religion might become misleading or harmful if we don't look upon it in the truest or most well-intentioned or spiritual sense. Could you help us understand your views on this? How do we mitigate this gap? How do we prevent any kind of organized thought from getting weaponized, and how do we come closer to it philosophically? How do we mitigate the dangers that arise out of the gap that you have mentioned exists?
Okay. So now that what you mentioned is a very, very true risk that we carry. In the Upanishads, there is one statement that Shurasya Dhara Nishita Duratkeya Durgam Pataspat Kavayo Vadanti. That the scholarly people or the very learned people, they say that the path of spirituality is like Shurasya Dhara. Shura means a blade or a knife, and or a razor. So Shurasya Dhara, if we have a very sharp razor, then we can put it to very good use. Like, let us say I take a very sharp knife and I can cut vegetables and make a nice dish out of it. And I can feed myself and my friends and nourish our body. And, it can be very helpful for us. On the other hand, that same knife, if I take it and I use it for some criminal purpose, I can use it to harm someone. And that can, the knife can be used in both ways. It can be used to achieve a good purpose, or if we use it in a wrong way, it can bring great harm also. So the scriptures themselves have already warned us that when it comes to spirituality, we have to handle it very, very carefully. And we have to, unless we handle it carefully, what will happen? There is a great risk that we can harm ourselves and we can harm others. So the question arises, how do I use this razor of spirituality in a way which I can benefit myself and others and the society at large without harming anyone? So for that, what we need is we need guidance. If we are, if we have an expert person who teaches us how to handle this razor sharp instrument of spirituality, then we can rest assured that we are utilizing it in the best way possible. So therefore, in the Vedic scriptures, a great emphasis is given for understanding spirituality, not based on my thinking and my conceptions, because my mind can mislead me also. Today, what I'm thinking is right. After a few days, I might feel, no, what I was thinking earlier was wrong. Something else is the right thing to do, or to say, or to do. So, we cannot depend upon our own mind and our own intelligence also. So, therefore, in the Vedic scriptures, a great emphasis is given for understanding spirituality from spiritual masters. And who are these spiritual masters? They are not ordinary people. They are people who have dedicated their lives for the welfare of the society, greatly renounced the personalities, who have no other goal in life than the benefit, the welfare of the society. So such people who have no other ulterior motive than the benefit of the society, their understanding, their wisdom of how to understand spirituality and apply it in our lives is very, very important. And so that's why, if you look at the Bhagavad Gita, which is a great book of philosophy which we find in the religious scriptures, in the Vedic scriptures, Lord Krishna says, Tad Vidhi Pranipatena Pariprashnena Sevaya. So he advises Arjuna, with whom the conversation is between Krishna and Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna is advising Arjuna, approach the people of wisdom and you inquire from them and understand the real import of the spiritual scriptures. So the best way, the safest way, just like all of you are coming to Harvard Kennedy School to study your subjects in a formal way, in a structured way, in a college where teachers come and teach you the subject matter. That's the right way to understand knowledge. This is true for all branches of knowledge. The books of knowledge are available in the outside store. Nowadays, we have internet. You can go to ChatGPT, you can go to Google, and you can download whatever you want and you can study. Will you become an expert policymaker by that? No, you cannot. You need to study the same books under a learned professor to be able to properly assimilate that knowledge and to be able to apply it properly. So, there is a well-known saying, half knowledge is more dangerous than ignorance. So if somebody, picks up some books from the market and he studies them, doesn't go to college, doesn't study them under a proper professor, then, and he declares himself to be a doctor, and you have some issue, you want to undergo some surgery, will you go and submit yourself to him? He will say, I will better I don't undergo any treatment rather than to go to such a person, because he has got half knowledge. He has learned something. He has on his own, which you cannot depend upon. So always knowledge. We have to be very careful to not simply try to study it on our own, but to gather it from people of wisdom. And so this aspect of spirituality has been stressed upon in the Vedic scripture. And if we take advantage of that, then all the benefits of spirituality, religiosity, morality, all those things will be available to us. Okay.
So we'll get to audience Q&A. This is the last question from my side. I know you would have a lot of questions prior to coming to this session, and also a lot of out of what our esteemed guest today has mentioned. So my last question is actually a collection of two sub questions. You mentioned what is the importance of not just guidance but also the guide. So a trainer is in a way more important compared to the training material, and half knowledge is more dangerous than absence of knowledge. So what's the best way to stay spiritually rooted and grounded? So what is that day-to-day practical tips that you would give to us that we can use to improve our lifestyle as we enter a world in, let's say, another 1 or 2 years, wherein there's going to be high amount of intensity and pressure, long working hours, the real pulls and pressures of our modern lives. So this is the question on what day-to-day trips can we inculcate in ourselves, what habits can we sort of bring in our day-to-day lives. But more importantly, could you share your own personal experience of how engaging in a spiritual movement like Hare Krishna movement brought a positive delta or a positive impact in your day-to-day lives?
Yeah.
So what are some day-to-day practical tips that you would give to us? And also, what is the personal element in it that you have literally experienced or witnessed due to your association and contribution to the spiritual movement we're talking about?
Yes. So, when we look at practical, how to practically apply the spiritual aspect to our lives, in fact, according to time, place, and circumstance, the adoption of spirituality or the application of spirituality also changes. It has to change. We cannot try to lift something which was being practiced in some age-old times and try to force fit it into the present day culture and environment. In the olden days, we used to have great sages, great rishis, munis, who used to go to the Himalayas. We would have heard about them, who go to the Himalayas and they used to meditate and all those kind of things. Those are impractical things which cannot be done today. So we need practical solutions for the modern day world. So the Vedic scriptures, the wonderful thing about the Vedic scriptures is they understand this particular aspect, that with changing times, the methods also have to change, which will be practically feasible for the people to follow. So the Vedic scriptures say that for the current day, modern age, where we live in a world where there is it is very fast paced and there is a lot of stress and that kind of environment which we are exposed to in the current day world, the best way to practice spirituality is the method of mantra meditation. So there are certain mantras. The word mantra in Sanskrit means manaha trayate, that which liberates our mind. You see, whatever, like you mentioned, whatever stress we face or whatever the challenges we have to face in our life, it is all in our mind. What appears like a mountain to me, to you it may appear like a mountain. So why? Because my thinking is different from your thinking. Your perspective is different from mine. You may be able to face the challenges in life much more easily than me, because the only difference is the way I'm thinking and the way you're thinking. So what we actually need is not liberation from the challenges we face. What we need is liberation from the engagement of our mind, the limitations of our mind, so that we are able to face everything in life in a much more mature and sober way, and to be able to take things in our stride. So for that, the most optimal way, which is explained in the Vedic scriptures, is mantra meditation. We take a mantra which is meant for liberating us from the limitations of our minds, and to be able to face life with all the challenges it throws at us in a very dignified way. So the practice which I have been undertaking or following for the last more than 25 years is to chant one mantra, which is a very simple and easy mantra. It is called the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. The mantra is very simple. It goes Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. It's a very simple mantra, and what it means, the meaning is also very simple. It is calling out the names of God. So anybody can practice this mantra meditation, and it doesn't depend upon your nationality, your religion, your what your faiths are, what your beliefs are. It is not dependent upon any of these. It is the process which will work. All of you can take it as an experiment and try practicing this chanting every day. The only thing that you have to do is simple thing. One is you have to chant it loudly, and the focus is on the sound which you are uttering. You, without thinking anything else, you focus on hearing what you are chanting, and do this for a fixed number of times a day. We recommend that a person chant at least 108 times of this mantra every day, and you fix a particular number, whatever is comfortable for you, and you practice it for, let us say, 6 months. You take a fixed time period for yourself, and you practice it and see the difference for yourself. You see, if you have never tasted honey in your life, I can go on explaining how sweet honey is, right? But will you get the taste of honey by that? You will not get. You have to put a spoon into that honey, take it and put it in your mouth to be able to really relish the sweetness of honey. In a similar way, I can go on explaining how I have achieved a lot of things, benefits from chanting this mantra, and how it is so beneficial, etc., etc., etc. But the proof of the pudding lies in eating it. So you try it for yourself. As I said, there is no restriction. There is no rule that it is meant only for Hindus or only for this class of people or this nationality. There is no such rules. It is open for everyone. All of you can try it. And you try it and you experience the benefits for yourself.
So this is from my side as the moderator. We open the floor for questions to the audience, and we'll do this till 6 p.m. So the next 20 minutes are about questions from the audience. Sure, it will be helpful for us if you could also start up the question after mentioning your name.
Hi,
And
thank
what
you
you're
so
doing
much.
at HGS.
So my name is Aditi. I'm studying at HGS. So I'm really curious to understand, how do you identify a true spiritual guru, given that gurus are important in this, in the realm of spirituality, like you just said. But how do you identify? I think I've listened to so many. I relate to some are not alive anymore. But if I wanted to seek out and probably just have conversations with someone, how would I know who was going to lead me?
That's a very good question, Aditi. So, I will give a brief example taking from our practical lives, which will make it easy to understand. The way of acquiring knowledge in this material world is very simple. We go to a college and we study, like I said earlier, we study the knowledge under a professor. That professor, how do you know he is a bona fide professor? If I study under him, I will get a proper education, I will get a certificate which will be valid in the world. If I cannot go to some guy who is selling vegetables in the street and try to learn the knowledge from him, right? I need to go to the right person. So I go to a college, an authorized college, and I look at the credentials of the professor. Who has the professor studied under? The professor should have studied under another professor. And that professor in turn should have studied under another professor. If the professor says, no, I didn't study under anybody, I learned it by myself, then you know that this is not the right place to go, right? So, in a similar way, I'm giving a very crude example for us to be able to understand this. In a similar way, in the Vedic scriptures, there is a concept known as Guru Shishya Parampara, meaning the succession of spiritual master and disciple. So, if anybody declares himself as a spiritual master, the test is who is his spiritual master. Now, if he says XYZ is my spiritual master, you ask him, okay, who is that XYZ spiritual master? So, like that, when we trace the chain of gurus and disciples, the chain of spiritual masters and disciples, the original propagator or the original person who established philosophy has to be the Supreme Personality of God, because according to the Vedic scriptures, Dharmam tu sakshat bhagavat pranitam. The philosophy and the principles of religion cannot be created by an ordinary man. When an ordinary man creates something like a religion, what does it become? It becomes a cult. And we all know there are so many cults which have come and which have created havoc in people's lives. Whereas when real religion is that and real philosophy is that which has to be given by the Supreme Personality of God himself. Okay, so the unbroken chain of spiritual masters and disciples has to finally go and culminate in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in which case we can accept that that is the proper chain of spiritual masters in which I can receive the knowledge properly. So if you look at the Bhagavad Gita, which is given by our Acharya Srila Prabhupada, in that Prabhupada gives a full chain of 32 people stemming from the Supreme Lord Krishna himself, who was given the Bhagavad Gita was originally spoken by Lord Krishna himself. So that person who gave the philosophy originally, Krishna is at the beginning of the chain of spiritual masters and disciples, and Srila Prabhupada is the 32nd in that line, in that unbroken chain. So we can have confidence that yes, this knowledge is bona fide. Actually, this is not a new principle which I am stating. In the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Evam parampara praptam evam rajarshvayo viduhu. This knowledge, the spiritual knowledge, is a knowledge which has to be obtained in a disciplic succession, which is known as a Guru Parampara, which is stemming originally from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is a test which you can apply.
But how do we translate this in practical terms in our day-to-day lives? Let's say, we all exit this session at 6:15, 6:20, we go outside. What is the next step that we do in order to achieve what Aditi has mentioned?
Okay, well, I can give you a ready-made solution, because nowadays we have all, everybody looks for ready-made solutions. You walk into an aircraft, you want to have your lunch, you have a cup of noodles, you pour hot water into it and it's ready. You don't have to go to a microwave, you don't have to go to a kitchen and start cooking and all that, right? So I'll give you a ready-made solution. You don't have to go around searching where is that unbroken chain of disciplic succession which I can take benefit from. As I mentioned to you already, Srila Prabhupada is an Acharya, is a bona fide Acharya, who is 32nd in that line of disciplic succession. So all of you are welcome to study his books. They are all freely available. You can associate with our devotees here. Sadananda Prabhu is there, and our devotees are all here. They can all help you with the books of knowledge which Srila Prabhupada has given. And as I mentioned, practice the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra, read Prabhupada's books, and assess for yourself. It's not blind faith. It's not something which we are telling you blindly believe. You read them, you understand them, and you convince yourself whether this is the right thing. Is this the right path? So when you are fully convinced, you follow that. You will really be able to see the progress you are making in your spiritual life, and you will be able to truly understand how this is a bona fide path. So, like I said earlier, the proof of the pudding lies in eating it. So, these two things, practicing the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra and reading the books which are there, which are the whole volume of knowledge which is given by Srila Prabhupada, who is the bona fide Acharya, you can all gain very much from it.
So these are readings from this session that we are taking today. I mean, we read a lot of readings before and exiting the...
True. See, knowledge is something which you have to acquire by studying, by contemplating, by applying it, and then seeing the results for yourself. It's like I said, we are not looking at blind faith or simple belief. We are speaking of knowledge. And that knowledge has two aspects, theory and practice. So the books you study, you get the theory, you apply that in your life and see the transformations that come about in your life. Because this knowledge, what we are talking of, is not ordinary knowledge. It will bring about transformation of your heart. The way you look at the world, the way you perceive the life, the way you will formulate the purpose of your life, the goals of your life, everything will undergo a revolutionary change. See, this is Deepanshu was saying that he was asking me how practically how I have benefited from this, right? When I came across the books of Prabhupada, the Bhagavad Gita, and all these books of knowledge, I was about 26 years of age. I completed my engineering, and I was building great aspirations of making a career in the professional world. I had big aspirations. I wanted to become an MD, a CEO of some company. I wanted to get educated in the best universities, to do my postgraduate in business management, and so many, a lot of aspirations, like all of us have when we step out of college. But after reading Prabhupada's books, my whole perspective towards life changed, and I decided that this is, to pursue that path is not what my life is meant for. My life is meant for something much higher. There is a much bigger purpose to life, and that is how I dedicated my life to this mission. So it was a very conscious decision which I took based on the books of knowledge which I fortunately came across by studying Prabhupada's books. So the same transformation all of you can experience in your life. Only thing is, read Prabhupada's books with an open mind and try practicing the principles which are given there 100% without fail. Thousands of people have experienced this over the last 40, 50 years when Prabhupada's books have been available. And even today, all of you can definitely experience the transformation in your heart.
All right, other questions?
Yes, please. Mike.
My name is Z. I'm currently studying Sanskrit in the Department of South Asian Studies. So I was wondering, what made you choose Bhakti Yoga specifically, and how is it different from other kind of yoga?
When we speak of yoga, fundamentally the meaning of the word yoga means to combine or to join. So yoga is meant to join us with the Supreme God. It is meant to connect us with God. That is what all yoga processes are meant for. Of course, today, when we speak of yoga, generally, what comes first to our mind is one aspect of Ashtanga Yoga, where we do a lot of asanas. And we think that it is meant for improving our health. Improving our health is a side benefit. So, just like suppose you are taking down notes or you are writing down your assignment. And when you are doing that, you generate a lot of waste paper, right? And you put it into the waste basket. So your goal of writing the assignment is not to create that side effect of creating the waste paper you are putting into the basket. So similarly, the goal of Ashtanga Yoga is not simply to improve our health. That may be one of the side effects. The goal is something much higher, which is ultimately to connect us with God. So there are processes. There is broadly speaking, there is Ashtanga Yoga, there is Karma Yoga, there is Jnana Yoga, and there is Bhakti Yoga. There are 4 yoga systems, in a overall perspective, which are given in the Vedic scriptures. Or the goal of all of them is to connect the individual to God. What is our relationship with God? Now, if we go by the Bhagavad Gita, the Bhagavad Gita says that all these 4 processes, these 4 yoga systems of Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga, they are all not different processes. They are all different rungs on the same ladder. So the lowest rung on that ladder is Karma Yoga. That is the beginning. We start our spiritual journey with Karma Yoga. And when we perfect our practice of Karma Yoga, we go to the next rung in the ladder, which is Jnana Yoga. And we practice Jnana Yoga, which is the path of studying the Upanishads, Vedanta Sutras, and trying to understand them with our intelligence. So it is an intellectual study of the scriptures. So that is called Jnana Yoga. Jnana means knowledge, the path of knowledge. And when you perfect your analytical study of the scriptures and the world around you and yourself and how everything relates with each other, what happens is you come to the stage of Ashtanga Yoga. And in Ashtanga Yoga, we have asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, etc. So many stages are there. There are 8 stages. That's why it's called Ashtanga Yoga. And the final stage of that Ashtanga Yoga, after practicing your asanas and pranayama and all those things, is to come to the stage of Samadhi. So Samadhi means full absorption in the Supreme Lord. And when one achieves that stage, you come to the final stage on that yoga ladder, which is the process of Bhakti Yoga. So the Bhakti Yoga, according to the Vedic scriptures, is the final step on that ladder, which is the goal to be achieved by all yoga processes. So that's how the difference between Bhakti Yoga and the other yoga process. Yes, please. Can somebody pass the mic? We have yeah.
I'm Farid. I'm an MPhD professor.
Very nice.
I wanted to ask about some, like you refer to religion as a set of principles, and that it's the interpretation that can harm us or harm others. But in my opinion, there are some rules, maybe not in English, that the principle and the code per se hurts. Do you agree with that? Or is poor interpretation?
Well, what happens is that you see, when it comes to the different religious systems that are there, they have all evolved at different times, according to different places and different circumstances. And according to the circumstances which were prevalent at a certain point of time, certain rules and regulations might have been given. Okay. Now, when we look at the Vedic scriptures, the uniqueness of the Vedic scriptures is that they are meant for eternal time. They are not bound by the limitations of time, place, and circumstance. So I can understand where you are coming from. So even in that, even in the Vedic scriptures, there are certain rules and regulations which cannot be applied today. You see, that is where philosophy plays a very important role. Now, what happens is we have an underlying principle or an underlying philosophy based on which certain rules and regulations are given in the scriptures. Now, when time, place, and circumstance changes, we need to go back to the philosophy and see what is the basis on which these rules and regulations were created, and whether that application of that principle can be changed, but the principle cannot be changed, right? So whether that application is relevant today or not is something which we need to see. So any religious system which you take, whether it is the Vedic scriptures or whether it is Islam, Christianity, etc., they all largely, when we talk of these religions, we talk of them in terms of simply the rules and regulations. We rarely look at the philosophy behind it. So, as far as I am concerned, I am a practitioner of the Vedic system, so I can speak more for that rather than for the other religions because I'm not an expert in them. So, what happens is the Vedic, the unique characteristic of the Vedic way of life is that there is a very vast body of philosophy which is available. So today, if I look at the way Hindu religion is practiced, I was born in a Hindu religion. I was raised as a practitioner, as a religious person. My parents were religious people, and I grew up in a Hindu religious family. But I never knew the different, the philosophy behind those religious practices. When I grew up into youth, there were many questions which were running in my mind. That why it has to be like this? Why certain rules and regulations we have to follow? Sometimes I would question my parents. They would not be able to give answers. And I would be like, so why should I follow this? Okay, just to please my parents, let us keep them, let us keep them in good stead. So I may have followed. But when I started studying the philosophical aspects, when I started studying the Bhagavad Gita, the Bhagavatam, and other the philosophical books of knowledge, then I started seeing all those practices in a different light. So that is the advantage with the Vedic scriptures. There is a vast body of philosophy which is available, which can show the real perspective behind those practices and give us the wisdom whether these practices are still relevant today or not. I'll give you a small example. In the Vedic scriptures, there is a principle which is given that there are 7 kinds of aggressors. If somebody becomes an aggressor on these 7 fronts, then an individual has a right to defend himself and he can take the life of the aggressor. Like, for example, if somebody attacks you with weapons without any warning, and so he is an aggressor. So in self-defense, you can take his life. There is no reaction supposed to be given for that. The state laws cannot hold a person responsible for that action. That's true even today. Even the modern courts also recognize the right to self-defense, right? Then now what happens is the other aspect of this principle is that if I want to pick up a fight with somebody else, first I have to give him a warning. And second, I have to give him a weapon with which he can have there can be a level playing field. And when we fight like that, then it is called a fair fight. Of course, and these are all Vedic, in the olden ages, these principles used to be applied. In modern day, do we pick up arms and fight? We don't do that, right? So the principle is that in the society, if you have to maintain peace and harmony, there has to be a level playing field for everyone. So that was the principle on which these things were formed. But today we cannot say that okay, the Vedas state that I can give a weapon to another person, I can fight with him over whatever issue I have with him. We cannot do that today. So we have to understand the philosophy, and accordingly we have to see whether the application is true as of today or not. Now I'll give you another example. You see, there was an unfortunate incident. I think it was in London or somewhere, where one group they did a terror attack upon the city, and when they did the terror attack, they had prior to doing the attack, about a week or 2 weeks before that, they had sent an anonymous email stating that we will be carrying out some attacks. So after the attack, the group claimed that according to our understanding, if we have warned you, then if we have warned you before attacking you, then we are absolved of the responsibility for carrying out the attack. You see, this is a misinterpretation of the scripture. Like I gave the example from the Vedic scripture, the right understanding is when you say that you have to give a warning, that means you have to warn the person that I'm going to pick up a fight with you. You arm him exactly in the same way. Whatever weapons I have, you arm the other person also equally, create a level playing field, and then pick up a fight. Because in the olden days, that used to be, the kings and soldiers used to have those kind of things used to exist. But these people, what they have done is, I have given a warning. How did I give the warning? I sent an anonymous email, and I said I'm going to carry out some attacks, so I'm absolved of the responsibility. So this is a misutilization or a wrong misuse of what the scriptures are saying. First of all, that principle you cannot apply today. Number 2, even if you apply, it is in a different way. You have to give proper warning. The person also should be ready. And if the person refuses, he says, no, I don't want to fight, then you cannot attack him. So all these things are disregarded, and certain portions of the the religious scriptures are taken, and to satisfy the ulterior motive or agenda that a person wants to achieve, the person misuses it. That is why the scriptures say, Shurasya Dhara. It is like a razor's edge. You can either use it for a good purpose, or if your agenda is something else, you can misuse it. So how to prevent this misuse? How to prevent the people from using religion as a tool to propagate violence and to injure others, to harm others? The only way is we have to educate the people about the philosophy. If the proper philosophy is given, then people will be able to see for themselves if a person is speaking sense or not. So the best way is to educate the people. That's what I would say.
All right. So, guys, we are 4 minutes past 6. We close the session part of today's event over here. We also have some post-session activities which I'll talk about. Firstly, thank you so much for gracing us with your presence today.
It's my pleasure to be in all your midst, and I should thank all of you for patiently going through this. I should not say. How should I say it? How should I put it? You all have very patiently listened to me and given me a voice. I should thank you all for that, and I will be very grateful to all of you if you would take up the practice of, like I said, the mantra meditation technique, and try to go through some of the books of knowledge. And if any of you, if even one of you are able to benefit from that, I would feel that whatever discussion we had today has been fruitful. So once again, thank you, and thanks especially to Deepanshu for taking us through, moderating the whole session, and thanks to all of you once again. Thank you very much.
We have the books that our speaker had mentioned on this first table right in the center. We also